Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a good couple of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last year or so, and I would go as far as saying that this is a brewery I think we should be keeping an eye on over the next little while. They've done some really interesting things. I've had some quite unusual beers from these guys actually, but they've always worked out really nicely, and they're getting some really good feedback on their New England IPAs at the moment. So I think the next review we do from these guys has to be another New England IPA. But the one we have today is a little bit more unusual, and I'm very curious to see how it turns out. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to go to Kungsbacka, which is just a little bit to the south of Gothenburg, and we're going to have a look at another beer from AKiA Brygghus. So this particular beer is called After Sunset Before Dawn. It comes in at 6.5% ABV, and they're describing this one as a black New England IPA. So yeah, very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. This beer was released as part of the Lokal och Småskalig assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for March of 2021, and yeah, this is my fifth review from these guys. The last beer that we had from them was an oat stout, if I remember rightly. We've had a West Coast IPA, a rye IPA, and I think a New England double IPA as well actually. So we've had a few different styles from these guys, but I just thought when I was looking through the list, they had a New England IPA in there as well, but I thought, you know, I've not had a black IPA from them yet, so let's take a look at this one. But yeah, I think this should make for a really interesting beer, and like I said, I've enjoyed the beers I've had from these guys so far, so fingers crossed this is as good as the other ones, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on it as well. So let's see how we get on then. The After Sunset Before Dawn, 6.5% New England Black IPA, or Black New England IPA, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from AKiA Brygghus before, and you will no doubt see some more reviews from these guys over the next little while. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is that takes your fancy. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about AKiA Brygghus then, on to my brewery notes. So AKiA Brygghus, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Kungsbacka to the south of Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast, and the brewery was founded by Christian Fickved back in 2016. So he'd worked as a lighting technician in the music industry, which had taken him all over the world. He was also a sound engineer for the soundtrack of Our Lives, and also worked with the Wannadies and Tostrum as well. But he travelled around for 8 years, but then he had children, and so he decided that he wanted to stay put in his work life. So he started off working 20% in his brewery, and he brewed with a 300 litre kit, but he quickly found that this just wasn't big enough, and so he upgraded to a 1500 litre brewery in August of 2017. And this took his brewing capacity up to around 40,000 litres of beer per year. But in 2018 he brewed around 10,000 litres of beer, and then he upgraded the brewery again in 2019 to further increase the capacity. But Christian also has a long history of letting home brewers brew at the brewery as well, and over the last little while he's just been releasing more and more beers through Systembolaget and getting his name out there a little bit more. But the brewery itself can be found in the old Alfors mill, and the name of the brewery, AKiA, is basically an abbreviation of the full kind of extended Swedish name for this. I can't remember the exact the full name of it actually, but yeah, AKiA is an abbreviation of this thing. But as of March 2021, when I'm reviewing this beer for you, they've produced in the region of 50 different kinds of beer, and I'm sure that number will increase over the next little while. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about AKiA Brygghus for the moment. Quite a new brewery on the scene, and I think it was only about halfway through last year that I first encountered these guys, something like that. So yeah, they have been putting out some really nice beers, and I keep an eye out for what they're releasing in the local the Lokalis Moskalegt. So yeah, definitely keep an eye out for the different things that these guys are doing. As I said, they're getting some really good feedback on their New England IPAs at the moment. I've had a rye IPA, a New England, a West Coast, and an oat stout from them, and I've been impressed with all 4 of those beers so far. So fingers crossed the black IPA lives up to the other ones. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you at the moment about AKiA, like I said. But if you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and have a taste of this beer then. Very curious about this one. So as you can see, the artwork on this is pretty plain compared to the other ones. It's just, you know, darkness basically, but it works, you know, it works. There you can see on the side, this is the AKiA Brygghus symbol there. So obviously the Alforce mill, and then yeah, you can see this is the sort of data side of the beer, if you like, the After Sunset Before Dawn. 6.5% New England black IPA, black New England IPA, whatever, and it says that this one contains wheat and oats. And I was talking about this in another black IPA review quite recently, since, you know, it's only over the last kind of couple of months that we've been starting to see more black IPAs coming out, and a little bit before that we were having you know, the West Coasters were starting to appear again, which is nice, and it's nice to see that the beer scene is diversifying a little bit. I like New England IPAs, but you know, everybody was doing them and it was getting a little bit kind of monotonous. But I think this idea of putting wheat and oats into black IPAs is quite interesting. I always used to find with the more barley malty, West Coasty, if you can call them that, black IPAs, that they tended to be a little bit better if they had some sweetness in them, you know, a little bit of caramel or something like this. But I think the direction of putting oats and wheat in them to smoothen them out is another direction that I think could really work for these. So I'll be curious to see whether some breweries start doing the more West Coasty black IPAs as well. So I don't know if that's something that AKiA will do at some stages, to do a more kind of classic black IPA, but I always felt the classic, more West Coasty ones worked out a little bit better at the imperial strengths, but I've had quite a few that have proved me wrong on that side of things. But yeah, I think this could be really interesting. So this was a 440. This is a 440 milliliter can, I should say, not was. This cost me something like 45 Swedish kroner, which is normal for any kind of IPA here in Sweden. So €4.50, about £4 sterling, maybe about $5, $5.25 American for those of you watching in different parts of the world. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I'm very curious to see what this has in store for us. So yeah, let's look at this. That looks nice when we're pouring it. There we are. Yeah, so there we go. But yeah, that's a nice looking beer, I have to say. So as you can see, and as you would expect from a black IPA, this one is poured a lovely dark sort of ebony wood colour, kind of Coca-Cola sort of thing. Black as night, to be honest with you. When we shine the light through it, it does have a little bit of that sort of Coca-Cola Pepsi coloured edge to it. You can see the head on this one was about a half finger, and I would describe that as a kind of light to medium sort of beige colour. It's almost a little bit fawny, to be honest with you, which is quite interesting. But I'll say straight away, when you smell this beer, when you get a little whiff of it opening it up, it comes across really nicely. The fruity notes out of this are absolutely lovely, but you can see that head is just fading away to be quite a thin foamy layer. I'm not sure how well that's showing up on the camera right enough, but yeah, it's just a very, very thin foamy wispy layer there, and it's got a little bit of a thicker ring around the edge of the glass. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, but I mean overall it does look very, very nice actually. So yeah, thumbs up to AKiA Brygghus in terms of appearance. It's pretty much exactly what you'd expect. So yeah, nothing overly surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance when you consider what style it is. So yeah, let's go forward and have a little look at the aroma then. This I think should be really nice. Oh, that does come across very nicely, definitely. Yeah, it's got, this is really interesting. It's got a little bit of that old school black IPA sort of thing with it, but then it's just got that kind of modern smoothness, if you like. You can really smell the balance in the malt base here, and that's the crucial thing I think with a black IPA, is to get the malt base right. And I think this one's going to be very interesting. So first things first with this beer, what you'll get out of it is you'll get that roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crusty note. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a wee hint of Carafa in this one. I've always found that Carafa is a really good malt to give you that sort of well-fired bread crusty sort of thing. Carafa, remember, is a trademark malt of Weirmann in Bamberg down in Franconia in northern Bavaria in Germany. Awesome maltery, and you can, if you go and visit Bamberg and do Schlenkerland, Spezial and Zwergla and all of these kind of places, definitely go up and have a little look at the Weirmann maltery. The Carafa malts just give you this lovely sort of toasty bread crusty thing, and there's just a little bit of that coming out of this beer. So the backbone of this beer is a well-fired bread crust. That's not too dominant though in the aroma. It's just got a little bit, it just gives the aroma a little bit of dryness, which you, in fairness, you want from a black IPA. And you know, one of the things that I found when black IPAs first came out was that the black malt was a little bit too strong in a way. But then again, you have to remember, when you try a new style, usually you go through a kind of adjustment period. So maybe it was that, and maybe my palate has changed with regards to this style anyway. But yeah, you get that, you get just a nice bit of that toasty, well-fired bread crusty quality. On top of that, there's definitely there's a nice smooth kind of brown bready quality in there, and it's almost a little bit like a smooth German rye bread sort of thing. And I think the sweetness that you get out of the brown bread, because it is almost a little bit sweet and rye like some of these German or Czech breads that you can get. I do miss living in Germany and having access to these bakeries. The German bread is just lovely. But yeah, it's got a little bit of sweetness to it, and that's what makes me say it's got a little bit of rye bread a kind of quality to it. But there's no rye listed in the ingredients, but I think putting a little touch of rye in a black IPA could be a very interesting touch, but that's just me. But yeah, a lovely sort of brown, wholemealy, almost rye bready type quality to the beer, and on top of that you can smell the sort of smoothness of the oats. It almost gives you a little bit of that, it gives you a little bit of that kind of powdery thing, and just a little bit of the kind of almost sweetness that you can get out of oats as well. But if you take the aroma in a little bit more deeply, you can get just a little hint of the wheaty character, the sort of wheaty bitiness at the back of the nose. But remember, because it's a black IPA, that's not going to be at the forefront. The other things, the sort of Carafa bread crusty, brown bready things, are a little bit more powerful than that. So yeah, just just bear that in mind with this beer. But it's got a lovely little bit of sweetness to it as well. I personally think that black IPAs are nicest when they've got a little bit of a kind of brown sugary element to them, and you definitely get that with this beer. There's a good balance in this one between a sort of sweet, toasty caramel, if you like, and a little bit more of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing. So yeah, the aroma comes out of this one really nicely. I think that it's just really well balanced, that malty side of things. It's got breadiness and smoothness. You know, for me, the New England beers are all about the kind of smoothness, the oaty and wheaty smoothness, if you like. So you definitely get that in this beer. It's got a little bit of the older kind of the more old school toasty, bread crusty sort of thing that you expect of the black IPA. Although that, I think, should be an anchor. That should be a sort of prerequisite for the style, but it's also got a little bit of the sweeter brown sugary thing of the West Coasters too. So I think this, from the malty perspective, it is quite nice. There are one or two little woody undertones to the aroma, which you would expect in honesty from the style, but yeah, I think the aroma of this one is very, very nice. So yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, I think we can move to that now. The hoppy side of things is good as well. Yeah. So I think there's a little tiny touch of earthiness to this one. There's something in my head that's telling me the hop in this, there might be a bit of mosaic in this, but we'll come to that in a minute. But there's a little touch of earthiness for me. There's a nice kind of floral component, which I think works really well. I mean, as you come forward on the nose, you definitely get a little bit of floral aromaticity, and it's quite a bright floral aromaticity. And you've also got a nice little bit of a kind of grassy quality to the beer as well. And I would say the grassiness just has a very light zestiness. So yeah, the green component of this one is quite nice, and the beer smells nice and fresh. So that's what you'd expect. But yeah, the fruitiness of this one is quite interesting. So I think this beer, in terms of fruitiness, it leans a little bit towards the orangey side of things. There's something in my head telling me that there might be 2 hops in this. And I think it could be a little bit of Cascade and potentially a little bit of Mosaic. There's just, this beer really has a little bit of that lighter tangerine orangey thing that you would expect of Mosaic. But it's also got a little bit of that lighter, slightly figgy, red fruity thing that you might expect of Cascade. So yeah, I mean, the other thing that comes into my head, and I like playing Guess the Hops with beers, as you know if you've watched the channel, the other one that comes into my head could be Mandarina Bavaria, but the orangey notes that you get out of it don't seem oily enough for that. The floral notes are bright enough to be like a German hop, because no matter how high in alpha acid you go with German hops, they always retain a little bit of that Germanness, if you like, about the green component. So yeah, that's another thing, interesting point. But I've got a feeling there might be just a little bit of Mosaic in this beer. I'm trying to think if I've had many black IPAs with Mosaic in them, because Simcoe was always a very popular hop to use in these. But in recent times, some breweries have been trying, like Equinaut. I think I've seen like Citra and a few others being used in black IPAs as well. But there's something telling me there's a little bit of Mosaic in this one. I would be very curious to know. But yeah, for me, this beer, it has a little bit of a lighter orangey tangerine sort of thing to it. You've got a wee tiny little bit of a raisiny note to it, but I think it's quite you know, it has got a little bit of that raisiny sharpness to it, and a little bit of a kind of figgy note underneath, I would say, those light notes, and that's what makes me think Cascade can give you that. I'm trying to figure out if there's a wee touch of something else in there, but yeah, I would say a little bit of raisiny sharpness, figgy juiciness underneath, and then you have you know, and then you have a really nice just tangerine juicy kind of quality out of the beer. So yeah, the fruity side of this one is quite nice, and as you know if you've watched the channel for any length of time, I'm a sucker for these for orangey leaning IPAs. But yeah, the aroma of this one is really interesting, and it gives a very good impression of the beer. So take a bit of time to ponder that over. As I always say, that's half the experience with craft beer. We're going to taste this one now. So this one is the After Sunset Before Dawn, a black New England IPA, New England black IPA, whatever you want to call it, from AKiA Brygghus in Kungsbacka to the south of Gothenburg here in Sweden. Let's get stuck into this one. Slange, skål, cheers. Yeah, that is pretty nice. It's actually a little bit different to what I was thinking it would be from the flavour. It's actually, you know, I thought this was going to be a slightly thicker and kind of smoother one, but it's actually got a nice it's actually got a little bit of slickness to it and a little bit of oiliness. That's my first impression of this. I did expect this to be a little bit thicker than it is, but I tell you something, it's another solid beer from these guys, definitely. You know, they know what they're doing. Christian knows what he's doing, and I can see why people are saying this is a brewery to keep an eye on, and I would agree. I would definitely agree. I think, as I say, the next review has to be a New England, unless they do like a red IPA or something like that, because I love red IPAs. So the next review from these guys will do, I think, will be a New England, and we'll have a look at another one of those. But this is pretty damn solid for sure. I like this one. It's a really well balanced beer. I mean, is it the most striking thing I've had from them? Probably not. I mean, I think the rye IPA that we had the first time, I think maybe, but that again was my first experience with the brewery, and I was just like, you know, damn, this works. So, you know, first impressions I think are always quite important. So that maybe was potentially the most striking beer that I've had from these guys. But is it as good as the others? Yeah, I think it's pretty solid. But I would say, and I think probably Christian would agree with me, I don't know if this is the most striking one. But then all the beers I've tried from these guys have been different styles. So it's like, you know, apples and oranges. But I like this, and that's the main question. The main question should always be, is it a nice beer? Would you like to drink it again? And, you know, I would. So yeah, where do we start with this one? It is just very nicely executed. So yeah, straight away then across the middle of your palate, you can feel that nice sort of toasty, bread crusty sort of thing. That just blankets the middle of your tongue there, and it's actually fairly subtle in this beer. It kind of just sits underneath and it's there. You just can sort of know it's there. On top of that, you start to get, there is a layer of a sort of more brown bready, almost rye bready, grainy sort of thing, and that just sits on top of it. But I think the whole bready kind of quality, the whole sort of bready quality just kind of sits together. So yeah, I really like how that kind of how that sort of thing I just like how that kind of pairs together. It gives you a really nice, slightly toasty but really smooth backbone to the beer. On top of that, though, you can feel a mixture of the wheat and the oat just smoothing out the beer. That I think is kind of sitting on top of the kind of brown bready quality you're getting out of this one. So yeah, there's a little bit of a sort of wheaty smoothness to the beer, and then on top of that you can taste the sort of oaty quality. So it's almost like right down the middle line of your palate you get that smooth, slightly powdery, oaty character coming out of the beer, and I think that pairs together very, very well in this one. So yeah, it's nice. I mean, it really is a very, very smooth black IPA, this one, and it's got elements of everything that you would want out of it. Toasty bread crust, a bit of brown bread, a nice smoothness, and then you start to get the sweetness. I think the sweetness takes just a little bit of time to come out of the beer, but in the very centre of your palate there's definitely a straight up sweet caramel there. As you move further out from the centre, you start to get a little bit of a slightly roasty toasty brown sugar, which is quite interesting. And as you reach, as you really move towards the far edges of the tongue, you get a little bit of that kind of biscuity, McVitie's digestive kind of thing out of it. So I can appreciate how that goes together. Absolutely, I really like how that side of this beer goes together. So again, thumbs up to AKiA for the malt base on this. It's quite difficult to balance a black IPA malt base, but I think they've done it. They've done it pretty nicely in this one. So yeah, just a little bit of a straight up sweet caramel, a little bit more of a more toasty brown sugar as well, then a little element of biscuity qualities. I think black IPAs need a little touch of complexity to them, and this one shows it quite nicely. On the front, if you go to the front corners of your palate, then diagonally back, it's a little bit more woody. It is a little bit more sort of woody. But yeah, I like that. I do like how that goes together, absolutely. So yeah, that's the middle third of your palate. If you go a little bit further back to that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you do feel a little bit more of a grainy, slightly more well-fired bread crusty quality, just a little bit of a stronger thing, almost very slightly bitter. But then on the back third of your palate, you can feel that the more toasty, grainy elements start to come out of the beer, and you just get a little bit of the bitiness off the wheat as well. You can feel a mix of toasty, grainy sort of notes in there and a little bit of wheaty bitiness. So that's quite an interesting sort of thing, and that spreads a little bit further back. But on the back third of your palate, you can feel it's a little bit more sort of airy and light and things. You can feel the yeasty kind of components coming out of the beer in this one. So the back third of your palate feels a little bit more lighter and fluffy, if you like. So the sort of level of the beer from the back going forward, you can feel this. You've got the toasty grains underneath, and then the sort of more yeasty, wispy notes, if you like. So as you move forward, that gradually just condenses down, and on the border region it drops quite a bit. Then as you go forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of densifies, if you like. It just condenses and denses out as you go further forward on the palate. But yeah, I think that covers the middle of the palate quite well on this one, to be honest with you. That's fairly comprehensive. But yeah, nice malt base and yeast in this one for sure. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, back corners of the palate, there's definitely a wee bit of earthiness there. As you move further forward, it's when you get a little bit of a kind of herbal quality. Then as you reach the sort of front corners of the palate, it's you've got a nice bit of floral aromaticity to this one as well, but not too much. I mean, it's not too spicy or bitter or anything like that. It's just got a nice little bit of a fairly bright floral aromatic note. Then round the front curve of the tongue, the beer is a little bit lighter and grassy, and there's just a little touch of zest to that as well. So yeah, the green component I think suits everything else that's going on quite nicely, and I think for me, as I say, the key with a black IPA is achieving balance. So yeah, the green component works quite well. But yeah, let's look at the fruity side of the beer then. So border region between front and middle third of your palate, again it's quite similar to that between middle and back third of your palate. A little bit of a slightly thicker bread, you know, a toasty bread crusty element. Then the base of that front third of your palate is a bit of a smooth kind of brown bready sort of thing again. So that's just sitting under the fruity notes in the beer. But let's look at exactly what fruity qualities there are. So as I always say, on that front third of your tongue you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So yeah. And this one does have a nice kind of slightly oily slickness in the fruity notes. But yeah, when you take the beer in, it has a little bit, it does have a wee touch of a, is it raisiny? So you know, it's a little bit of a sort of raisiny kind of thing. Comes out this one. It does have a wee bit of that raisiny sharpness, but then it develops and you start to get on the back of that front third of your palate, you get a little bit of a raisiny kind of thing mixing in with the bread. It's almost like a bit like a fruit bread, but then as you move further forward, you can feel a little bit of the kind of cascadey, what I suspect is cascade. There's just a little bit of that almost figgy kind of quality coming forward, but as you move on to that front half of the front third of your tongue, it's distinctly more oily and I think sort of tangerine-y. So I wouldn't be surprised that there's just something that's telling me, I'm pretty sure there's a bit of mosaic in this. I'm pretty sure there's a wee bit of mosaic in this. I could be wrong. It can happen frequently because there's so many hops out there, but I do think there's a bit of mosaic in this one. It really has just a nice orangey tangerine note on that front third of your palate. On the back of that front half of the front third, you know, it sort of develops to be a little bit more light and zesty. It's a bit more oily and then it progressively gets lighter and more zesty, and then you've just got a bit of grassy zestiness on the front tip of the tongue. So the fruity side of this beer I think works very, very well, come to think of it. Yeah, so yeah, orangey, tangerine, and a little bit of a kind of cascadey sort of figgy quality in there as well, a wee bit of a sharper raisiny note, but the raisin doesn't hang around for too long. The raisin doesn't really hang around for too long in this. This beer very quickly switches to be more orangey and citrusy. But yeah, I mean, overall as a black IPA, I think this one's quite interesting, and I think the more that I drink of it, it really does show you the smoothness you'd expect of a New England, but it has got a good enough of the kind of old school West Coasty note, the sweetness and the sort of toastiness underneath. That it lets you know, yeah, this is a black IPA. The other thing I would notice is that the grainy notes, the bready notes kind of underneath that fruity part of the beer, I feel that they get a little bit more toasty the more that you drink of this beer as well. So yeah, this is a really interesting one. And I think that's why I've enjoyed the beers I've had from AKiA so far, because they test the palate. After nearly 2,800 reviews, you want things that are going to make you think a little bit, and this beer definitely does that. But really well executed, and again, thumbs up to AKiA for this, for sure. So yeah, let's move on to the mouthfeel then to round off. Like I said earlier, I was surprised at how kind of light this one was, but that's not a bad thing. I would say that this beer is pretty much right in the middle of the spectrum. It's a mid-bodied beer, but maybe towards the light end of mid-bodied. The carbonation is fairly smooth, but the beer really has a lighter and kind of slicker note to it, maybe just a little touch of oiliness, but it's a very, very slick beer in my mind. In terms of IBUs, this is difficult to say. I think the hoppy bitterness is maybe about 40-ish or something like that. I think overall this beer is maybe about 40 or maybe 50 IBUs at a push. You're going to get a bit of bitterness out of the malt base in this one as well as the hops, so that's worth bearing in mind. So there is a wee bit of bitterness to the beer, but like I said, the malt base, it's a little bit bitter and toasty underneath, and it's smooth in the middle and it's sweet on top, so you've got quite a few layers to the malt base. And the fruits for me are a little touch, you know, they're a little bit slick, they're a wee bit oily, but everything kind of goes, you know, everything in this beer I think fits together pretty nicely. It's got a bit of citrusy quality, a little bit of an oily fruit, and I just think it gives you everything you would want from a black IPA. So again, thumbs up to AKiA Brygghus, and I've enjoyed this one. Have a go at this, because this is something a little bit different, and the black IPAs are starting to come into things a little bit more, which is great. I've really missed this this style, and putting the New England spin on it I think is good as well. But I'd love to see These guys have a go at like a West Coast, a more classic black IPA as well, just for comparison's sake. But yeah, I think we can round off this review there. Another solid beer from AKiA. These guys know what they're doing. So yeah, this one was the After Sunset Before Dawn, a black New England IPA at 6.5% ABV from AKiA Brygghus in Kungsbacka, just to the south of Gothenburg. Really enjoyed this one. It's made me think a little bit. I enjoy this style, and I'm curious to see the future beers that AKiA bring out. I think we need to do a New England next, unless they've got like a red IPA or something that's a bit more unusual. But yeah, thank you for watching. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are, pardon me, from AKiA Brygghus, and we will probably return to these guys within the next month or two. We will definitely be looking at more beers from these guys fairly soon. Thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, and I'll catch you guys later. Slange, skull, cheers. Make sure you check out AKiA Brygghus from Kungsbacka, just to the south of Gothenburg. Cheers.